Another access modifier that I want to talk about is the protected. So we've seen the public and we've also seen the private. So now let's take a look at the protected. So when you declare a property as protected in a class, any other classes that extend this parent class then will have access to this property, right? So let's say in the US citizen class that is extending the person class, I wanted to access this name, for example, right? So let's say I wanted to access it so that I can change the name or something like that. And that is just an example. And I would come inside of that class. I'm going to create another function or method that's going to be called rename, and it's going to take a new name. So let's say new name, and let's say that's going to be a string. For now, we're gonna say, all right, what we want to do is we want to take the name of the user. So the current name of the user, so that would be me down there. So the name that I currently have, by calling the constructor and then passing in the name in here, is Junior. So right now, as it stands, this object or this instance of the class has the name of Junior. But remember, this name is not in the US citizen class, right? It's coming from the parent class. As you can see here, the parent class has the name property. But since we're extending the parent class, it's almost like this US citizen class has the name property as well. So now what we want to do is to access that name, so that name coming from the parent class, and then set it to something else. Because if we want to make any changes to any of the properties in the US citizen class, if it's coming either from this class or from the parent class, we just need to have a way to access it. So just to show you what's going to happen, if I try to access the SSN, right, so I can do this dot SSN, and you can see that I can access the SSN because it's inside of this class, this US citizen class, right? It's right here. You can see it right here. So I can access it. But the name, remember, it's coming from this parent class. So the parent class, which is person. So if I try to access the name and I do that name, you can see that it's not coming up. You can see that it's not coming up at all. And it's giving me an error and it says it's a private property. I can't access it. So that's an example where you would want to use the protected access modifier. So instead of private here, I would say protected. So when it's protected, then any other classes that extends this class then have access to this name. They can use the this keyword to access this name. Now we won't be able to set this name to anything, but you can see that the error is gone. And the reason we won't be able to assign this to anything else, since we're trying to change that name, is because this is read-only. So for now, let's just get rid of the read-only. And then we're gonna say, all right, so at this point, the name is gonna be the new name. So we pass in the new name. So you can see now, even though this name is not part of this class, it's coming from the parent class, we can still access it because we make it protected, which means that any other class that extends this parent class, then they have access to this property on the parent class by using the this keyword, which is what we're doing here. So now, just to show you an example, after I create the instance calling the US citizen class, passing the ID to the parent class, the name to the parent class, and then the SSN to this class, the child class. So this one, that's the class that has the SSN. All these two, they're going over to the constructor and the parent class. So now what I want to do is to just use this instance. Say I want to change my name. So after I print to the console, I'm going to call the same instance, and then I'm going to call rename, and then I'm going to pass in a new name. And here I'm going to say this is my new name now, right? So let's say this is my new name. And then what I want to do is to just print this out again so that you can see the difference. So I'm going to go down here and then print it again. So if I go ahead and run the code, we're going to have the same printout. So whatever we already have here and the output, which is coming from line 25. But whenever we print it again, after we rename this instance or rename me Junior, then the name is going to be Junior row. So let's go ahead and run that. And you can see for the first output, we get the name as Junior, but for the second one, we get the name as Junior row. So we were able to access this property from the parent class because we make it protected, which means any other class that extends the parent class, then they have access to this property and they can change it however they want. Another thing I didn't mention is the method inside of the parent class. So all the functions and methods inside of the parent class, you also inherit whenever you extend that class. So I'm going to grab this console log down there. And then I'm going to go inside of this print name. So let's say we want to print this name in all caps. So I'll come in here and then pass in the log. And then here, I'm going to change this to a template literal. And then I'm going to say name in all caps and then pass in the name in all caps. So I'm going to do $, open and close curly braces. And then I'm going to say this dot name and then call to uppercase again. So that's going to print the name in all caps, right? Because we're calling the to uppercase on a string. So now if I go down and I call this method, so the method from the parent class, as you can see here, if I hover over it, you can see it says it's a method right here. I can still have this printed out because this class, the US citizen class, which is what my instance is of, it's extending the parent class, which means I not only inherit all the properties, but also all the methods. So if I go down and then I call from this instance from the US citizen, I call print name. Maybe we should rename that. So I'm gonna right click, rename symbol, print name, and caps, so that it can make more sense. So if I call this method down there, so it's gonna log the name, it's gonna say name in all caps, and then it's gonna print the name in all caps. And remember, this method or this function, it doesn't exist on the US citizen. You can see the US citizen class, it ends at line 22. So we don't have this print name in caps inside of the US citizen class. It's coming from the parent class. And I just want to show you that whenever you extend a class, you also inherit all of the methods as well. So if we go ahead and run that, you're going to see name in all caps, and then you see the name in all caps. So you also inherit all the methods as well. So say I wanted to have my own print name in caps inside of the US citizen class. So say I wanted to override this method, but inside of the US citizen class, I can do that as well. So if I go ahead and copy this and then put it inside of the US citizen class, and I can say in US citizen class, right? Just so we can differentiate. So now, even though I'm calling the same method down there, instead of calling the same one from the parent class, now it's going to call the one from the US citizen because we override this method from the parent class. So now if I run it again, you can see that it says in US citizen class, and then we get the same output. So you can see how powerful inheritance is when you're using TypeScript. And it's almost like you're using Java or Python, because that's how powerful TypeScript is when it comes to typing and having very strong object-oriented programming, even though it's not really object-oriented programming because all of this code is going to be transpiled into JavaScript. So it's almost like you're working in some backend application using, Python or Java or some strongly typed language.